Okay guys, Josh Cornell here. We're at White Point Gardens in Charleston, South Carolina. As you can see behind me, we got some live oak trees, and they're going to be the location of our first set of clues, which is the first 5 literary clues from the puzzle taken together. And these clues say, of all the romance retold, men of tales and tunes, cruel and bold, seen here by eyes of old. And what this is referencing is the preface of Treasure Island. The first paragraph of the preface is going to connect all of those first 5 clues in the verse to this book. And the second paragraph is going to give us the clue that we need for context to move on in the puzzle. Okay, so the preface is, if sailor tales to sailor tunes, storm and adventure, heat and cold, if schooners, islands, and maroons, and buccaneers, and buried gold, and all the romance foretold, exactly in the ancient way, can please as me they pleased of old, the wiser youngsters of today. So be it, and full on, if not, if studious youth no longer crave, his ancient appetites forgot, Kingston or Ballantyne the brave, or Cooper of the wooden wave, so be it, also, and I may, and all my pirates share the grave, where these and their creations lie. Okay, so, if we look at the first paragraph, okay, we got exactly, and all the romance retold, and all the old romance retold. It's exactly in there, right? So that's what leads us to this. Literary reference, and then we got, men of tales and tunes, and in the preface it says, if sailor tales to sailor tunes. Seen here means seen here in the park that we're going to be grounded in, right? So this is grounding us in White Point Gardens definitively, and the reason why is because pirates were hung on the branches of these trees and left to hang for 2 weeks before they were cut down and buried in mass graves. So underneath all the oaks of White Point Gardens, there's mass pirate graves. So this is telling us 2 things. Firstly, that we're definitely supposed to be at White Point Gardens, right? So we're at the right place. Secondly, it's telling us that we're definitely not digging in the garden, because the treasure will not be located here, because we know that there will be no treasure in a graveyard. He's specifically telling us that yes, we're in the right place, but we're not at the right place of the treasure, because we're not going to be able. We're definitively told not to dig here, right? So he's giving us specific instructions to be in the park, but not to dig here. So that's kind of telling you that it's probably going to be right outside the park somewhere, right? The second paragraph, we're going to focus on specifically the last 2 lines. And all my pirates share the grave, where these and their creations lie. That's referring us to the history of the place, and that's telling us that it's not going to be in the graveyard, right? So we know that we're in the right place, we know we're in the right spot, and the next clue is going to tell us where to start. The next clue is stand and listen to the birds. And if we walk right over here, we're going to come to the bandstand, and immediately we're going to know we are at the correct location because of 2 reinforcing clues. Everything is reinforced to give everything context. If you're unsure, you should have if you're unsure you're at the right location and it hasn't been reinforced by another clue, then you might not be at the right location, right? But we know that stand and listen to the birds is definitely taking us here to the bandstand. Okay? So, if we go to the bandstand, immediately you can see in memoriam, M.F. Williams, April 1905. We know that this whole puzzle relates to April, the number 4, and 4 p.m., correct? Via the birth flower, the birthstone, and the number. So we're definitely at the right place. And listen to the birds is a reference to, in April, there are a bunch of large water birds that come and nest in the trees. And if you look right up there, you can see a nest. These birds are supposedly really loud and really stinky, according to the cop that Seabass had sicked on me. But now we know we're definitely in the right place. Stand and listen to the birds, reinforced by the April and the large birds that, they're not here right now, it's late February, but if it were April, you would hear them, and you would see them, and you would probably smell them. Anyways, the next clue is hear the cool song of water. So we're moving from the bandstand to a fountain, right? There's two fountains in the park. One right behind me is the Hunley Monument, and the other over there by that short cannon over there is the Dancing Girl, which is the little kid's water fountain, okay? But we know because we're standing here, we can only hear this one. So this is the one we're supposed to go to. So let's head over to the Hunley Monument. Doing a live stream, treasure hunt. So now we're at the Hunley Monument, and it says, in memory of the supreme devotion of those heroic men of the Confederate Army and Navy, first in marine warfare to employ torpedo boats, 1863 to 65, moved by the lofty faith that with them died crew after crew, volunteered for enterprises of extremest peril in the defense of Charleston Harbor. Okay, so this is telling us that it's relating to a ship accident where a bunch of men died in a ship that was torpedoed. This doesn't have much relevance or context right now, but it's actually going to reinforce one of our final locations as the right point. So keep this in mind. Do not forget about this here, okay? And I'm just got to bring up the live stream. Here. Okay, guys, and here we are at the badass, never-ending story-style catfish fountain, right? So that's to hear the cool song of water. And if we come over here on the other side, it says, erected by the Daughters of the Confederacy and the Memorial Association of Charleston, South Carolina, May 1899. Okay, so we know we're at the right location. From the bandstand to the fountain, hear the cool song of water, we're here, and the next two clues are going to reinforce this as the right spot, and also teach us about the history of the area and the element of truth and justice that Preiss has designed into every single puzzle. So the next clue is hearken to the words, freedom at the birth of the century. And we actually have to break that up because it's actually two separate literary references teaching contrasting two elements of history. Okay? On the first hand, we have hearken to the words, and this is a reference to the document, hearken to the words of a true patriot, 1840. The relevant quote seems to be near the start when a correspondent writing from Jackson on the 10th says, "The 8th was a glorious day for the people of Old Madison." So this is telling us that something relating to the 8th is going to come into importance later on in the puzzle. Okay? Freedom at the Birth of a Century is a reference to the book Freedom to the Free, Century of Emancipation, 1863 to 1963, which is about the history of slavery and emancipation in Charleston. It was a submission to the United States Commission on Human Rights in 1963. If you look at this book, it tells you how basically in the 1700s, late 1700s, mid to late 1700s, that there was a period where the African American community dominated Charleston and basically controlled the area, and they were all free. They were allowed to do whatever they want. They had they weren't slaves. They basically enjoyed a period of freedom here in Charleston until some Confederate asshole decided to come and because he saw an easily accessible bank of African American people that he thought he could force into submission and enslave to use to work on his plantations, right? So what Preiss is doing is directly contrasting the mainstream history of Charleston, which if you go on any of the tours, if you look at any of the signs, it says nothing about the African Americans. It only says the stuff about Confederacy, right? So he's challenging us to learn about both sides of history and teaching us about an element of truth and justice, which he designs into every single puzzle, right? So basically he wants us to know that the African American community were the patrons of this area prior to the European colonists who came in here and forced them into submission, forced them to work on plantations, and the Edwin Blyden clue that comes up later. Edwin Blyden was a journalist. He came here to basically promote and market slavery abroad to other European settlers. So when the first slavers came here, he basically promoted their cause as just and legitimate in the papers, and then furthermore marketed like the slaves that they were selling to people that were outside of the Charleston area. Okay, so like right away we know that the Europeans were not the Confederates were not just, and that's probably why a bunch of people in this community are rallying around to have a bunch of these Confederate monuments taken down. Okay, but freedom at the birth of a century also reinforces us as being at the correct location, because it says May 1899. So we know we're definitely at the correct location because this is the only monument that in the park that's from around the birth of a century. So that clue not only forced us to look up 2 literary references, compare and contrast their histories to learn about the element of truth and justice, but it also reinforced this position as our next spot in the hunt. The next clue is May 1903, and that's a reference to the capstand that used to sit at the east end of the middle path through the park, but it's no longer there. A statue of Fort Moultrie is there, but we're going to go down there, and Preiss is using these 2 specific locations to direct us toward a third location very specifically. Okay, so we're gonna walk down to I'm gonna show you the stuff here. We're gonna walk down past the Sims Monument. Author, journalist, historian, probably an asshole. To the Jasper Monument, definitely an asshole. And we're going to go down to Moultrie, where the capstand used to stand. He's right there. You can see some people reading it. So basically, the capstand was basically a circular thing with some holes in it that you would put either pieces of wood or pieces of bar in order to move it around in a circle, and I'm not sure if it was like to wind up rope or something of that nature. Anyways, it's really the location that's key, okay? So keep in mind that we're going to be directed to our next location via the last 2 clues. So keep in mind the Hunley Monument is on the edge of the park on South Battery, and the capstand was right here where the Moultrie statue dedicated in 2007. So we know that that's not part of the puzzle now stands, and this is telling us something very specific. Pardon the motorcycles. So now we're at this location, and if we were to connect the last 2 clues, we're going to be taken from the Hunley Monument down to the south corner battery, and from our position here at the capstand location to meet where they would meet up, right? So we're kind of geolocating ourselves. We're using those 2 positions to geolocate ourselves to this corner, the corner of South and East Battery. This is where Preiss is directing us, okay? So because he took us out to the side, he took us down here, right? He took us right to the Hunley Monument, which is right down there, and he took us to the capstand, which is right down here. And if you connect them together, we're right here at the corner of South and East Battery, okay? From here, we're going to be moving towards purely visual clues, and that's the trick of the puzzle's design, this specific puzzle's design. So after this, we're going to have to look at the pendant, the Fort Sumter pendant, and we're specifically going to look at the 3 colored lines on the left cheek of it. Those lines reference Rainbow Row, which is, as you can see the pink house right from here. There's the pink house right there, eh? Oops, let's get this right. There's the pink house right there. So that's the start of Rainbow Row. So basically, Preiss is taking us to this corner with the first part of the verse section of the puzzle, and via the purely visual part of the puzzle, he's gonna direct us to walk right down north on East Battery, along Rainbow Row, which is a very famous, historic, and popular tourist destination with some awesomely gorgeous architecture and some beautiful colors. And the reason for that is that he's pushing us towards the park, the museum, and the position that you will need to catch the ferry to go across to Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter is actually over there, okay? It's over there. So we can't get directly there. To get there, we have to walk all the way down here. So that's what Price is telling us. So I'm gonna stop the video now because I'm gonna lose Wi-Fi if I leave the park. But we're gonna pick up down part the way down Rainbow Row. I'm gonna pick back up again, and we're gonna go down to Fort Sumter.